All right, let's talk about two words that can sound pretty intimidating if you're a new business. Corporation tax. Yeah, it sounds complicated, right? But honestly, getting your head around it is absolutely fundamental. So in this explainer, we're going to slice right through all that jargon. We'll show you exactly how the UK government figures out a company's tax bill. And, maybe more importantly, how understanding these rules can seriously impact your bottom line. So to make this all feel a bit more real, let's actually follow the journey of a brand new company. We'll call them Stellar Startups Limited. We're going to be with them for their entire first year in business. I mean, from their very first sale all the way to that big moment when they figure out their final tax bill. This is where all the theory gets real. Okay, so before we jump into any of the number crunching, let's get the fundamentals down. What is corporation tax, really? And who actually has to pay it? The answer isn't always as straightforward as you might think. At its core, it's actually pretty simple. When a company makes a profit, the government gets a slice of that pie. Think of it as the government's share of a company's success. But, as always, the devil is in the details, and that's where things start to get interesting. Now, how much of that pie the government can touch really depends on one huge factor: where your company calls home. See, if you're a UK resident company, you pay tax on your profits from everywhere in the world. But a company based outside the UK, well, they only pay UK tax on the profits they generate from their UK operations. That is a massive critical difference. Okay, and this right here is probably the single most important idea we're going to talk about. Get this, the profit figure you see on your company's accounts is almost never the same number you actually pay tax on. So what's going on there? Let's break it down. So have a look at this. This is the first year profit and loss for our company, Stellar Startups. You can see they brought in revenue, took out their expenses, and ended up with a profit of £50,000. Seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Well, let's just say HMRC, the UK's tax authority, sees things a little differently. The reason for that difference all comes down to something called disallowable expenses. Basically, these are costs that the government says, nope, you can't deduct that from your profit when you're calculating your tax. Classic examples are things like taking clients out for a meal or an accounting thing called depreciation. That's just how a company shows an asset losing value over the years. For the tax calculation, we have to act like those costs never even existed and add them straight back onto the profit. Okay, let's see what that actually does to the numbers. So, let's say Stellar's £10,000 of disallowable costs were made up of £5,000 for depreciation and another £5,000 for client entertainment. We take their £50,000 profit and we add those two back in. And boom, just like that, their profit for tax purposes has shot up to £60,000. But hang on, it's not all one-way traffic. The government doesn't just take stuff away. Right, so this is the crucial part. While the tax system might take away with one hand by disallowing some expenses, it absolutely gives back with the other. And it does this for a very specific reason: to encourage businesses like yours to invest in things, assets, that are actually going to help you grow. And this is the key. Remember how we had to add back that depreciation cost? Well, the tax system has its own much better replacement for it, and it's called capital allowances. This is a really powerful tax break that businesses can claim whenever they buy things like new machinery, equipment, or computers. And when I say powerful, I mean it. This number, £1 million, that's the annual investment allowance, or AIA for short. What that means is that UK companies can currently write off the entire cost of up to £1 million worth of qualifying assets right against their profits in the very same year they buy them. It is a massive, massive incentive to invest in your business. Okay, so let's pull all these pieces together. This is the full journey, from start to finish, to find that all-important final profit figure, the one you actually pay tax on. So you start with your accounting profit, you add back all those naughty disallowable costs, and then you get to take off this amazing deduction for your capital investment. So remember our company, Stellar Startups? During the year, they bought £20,000 worth of new equipment. Well, thanks to that annual investment allowance, they can deduct the whole lot. So we take that £60,000 adjusted profit figure, we subtract the $20,000 for capital allowances, and there it is. We finally have our magic number, a taxable total profit of £40,000. All right, we've got our final taxable profit, £40,000. Now for the final piece of the puzzle, applying the tax rate. So how does this number turn into the actual cash that Stellar Startups has to hand over to the government? Well, for the 2025 tax year, the UK has this kind of tiered system. It's pretty straightforward. If your profits are £50,000 or less, you're on the small profits rate, which is 19%. If you're a big player with profits over 250,000, you're on the main rate of 25%. And if you're somewhere in that middle zone, well, there's a marginal rate that basically slides you up from 19 to 25%. So, for stellar startups, their taxable profit of £40,000 slips in nice and neatly under that first £50,000 threshold, and that means they get to use the small profits rate. We just multiply their £40,000 profit by 19%, which gives them a final corporation tax bill of £7,600 for their very first year. Not too bad. So there we have it, the final tax bill. But, knowing what you owe is only half the battle. The other half is knowing when you have to pay it. And getting the timing right is absolutely crucial if you want to stay on the right side of the law. Now, here's a detail that catches a lot of people out, so listen up. You actually have to pay your tax bill before you officially file the return. For most small companies, that payment is due 9 months and 1 day after your company's year end. The full detailed tax return itself, that's the CT600 form, isn't actually due until a whole year after your year end. And just a quick but really important word of warning here. Getting this stuff wrong can be seriously expensive. HMRC figures out penalties based on your behavior. So, an honest mistake might get you a slap on the wrist, maybe no penalty at all. But if they think you just didn't take reasonable care, that could cost you up to 30% of the tax you owe. And if they decide you deliberately tried to hide something, the penalty can be up to 100% of the tax. Ouch. So after going through all that, what's the big takeaway here? Well, it's that corporation tax isn't really just a simple percentage. It's more like a roadmap. You see, the things the government disallows and the really generous allowances it gives, they're all signals. The government is basically shouting, hey, businesses, don't spend your money over there, invest it here. We want you to buy new equipment to innovate, to grow. So understanding all this isn't just about ticking a compliance box. It's about seeing the tax system for what it truly is, one of the most powerful tools the government has to steer the entire economy.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking on a subject that sounds incredibly technical, but it's absolutely fundamental to the financial health of any UK corporation. We're talking about corporation tax, or CT. We've got a really detailed map of the rules here, and our mission is to cut through the jargon. We want to show you where the real financial leverage points lie.
Exactly. And for anyone running a business or, managing its finances, this isn't just a set of compliance hoops to jump through. It's a strategic framework. Our goal today is to efficiently pull out the key levers that companies use to define their taxable profit. We want to identify where the tax rate shifts, sometimes in really unexpected ways, and show you how to strategically manage things like investment costs and business losses.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute basics then. Who is actually caught by this tax?
Right. So CT is primarily charged on the worldwide profits of any company that's incorporated in the UK. Worldwide. So if a company is set up in London, even if, say, 90% of its trading happens in Dubai or Dublin, it's still subject to UK CT on everything it earns globally.
Okay.
And conversely, a non-UK resident company, well, they only pay CT on profits that come specifically from a UK permanent establishment. So incorporation, that's what determines residency and therefore the scope of the liability.
That sets the geographical stage perfectly. Let's jump straight to the first critical lever, which is the rates themselves, Post-Finance Act 2024.
We have two core headline rates. The main rate is 25%, and if your profits are £50,000 or less, you qualify for the much lower small profits rate of 19%.
A pretty simple structure then, until you asked what happens in the middle. That gap between £50,000 and £250,000, this is where the system gets, well, let's be honest, it's pretty penalizing.
This is the big strategic takeaway for any mid-sized business. Your actual tax rate in this band depends on something the tax code calls augmented profits.
Augmented profits.
Yeah, it's your core taxable total profits, or TTP plus any non-group dividends you've received. And that final figure, that's what dictates whether you're below the lower limit of 50K or if you've hit the upper limit of 250K.
So if I'm sitting right in that middle band, say at, £150,000 in profit, I'm subject to this thing called marginal relief. But why isn't that just a smooth, gradual transition up to 25%? What's the unexpected penalty here?
It's so counterintuitive. You calculate the tax at the main 25% rate, and then you apply a reduction using marginal relief. But if you actually analyze the effective tax on every new pound you earn within that band,
Yeah.
the analysis we looked at shows the increase in tax results in an effective marginal tax rate of 26.5% on that slice of profit.
Wait, hold on. You mean the rate on profits between 50,000 and 250,000 is actually higher than the main rate of 25%?
That's it. It creates a spike, a
Yeah.
kind of disincentive to sit right in the middle.
That's fascinating.
You're mathematically incentivized to either stay safely below that 50,000 pound threshold or, dramatically surge past the 250 mark to drop back down to the standard 25%.
And just to make things more complicated, you mentioned non-group dividends play a role here.
Oh, they absolutely do. So non-group dividends are generally exempt from CT themselves,
Okay.
but they are included when you calculate your augmented profits. By increasing your augmented profits, they effectively push you toward that 250K upper limit much faster. This means you qualify for less marginal relief, which just accelerates your company's exposure to that full 25% rate.
So the dividend factor can cost you money just by shrinking your access to it.
Exactly.
Okay. So that leads us perfectly to the next step. How do we actually construct those taxable total profits, the TTP?
The TTP is the absolute foundation. You start with your accounting profit, so that's profit before tax from your financial statements, and then you begin making all these tax-specific adjustments. The main process is adding back expenses that aren't tax-deductible and then substituting them with tax-approved deductions.
Let's focus on those disallowable expenses, the things accountants deduct, but HMRC says no, not for tax purposes. What are the big ones we need to reverse and add back?
The main add-backs are, first, depreciation and amortization. The tax system uses a separate mechanism called capital allowances instead.
Right.
Second, general entertaining for customers and suppliers. That's a flat no. And third, anything considered capital expenditure, like buying a new machine or a major building improvement. Oh, and you also add back things like political donations.
I think the subtlety on entertaining is really important to flag. If you're entertaining employees, say, the annual Christmas party, that expense is allowable.
That's the key distinction, yes. Employee welfare is generally encouraged. Client expenses are not. And speaking of specific rules, the criteria for allowable gifts to customers are, well, almost comically strict.
This detail always makes me laugh because it just shows how granular the rules can be. For a customer gift to be tax deductible, it has to cost less than £50 per person. It cannot be food, drink, or tobacco. And it must carry an advertisement for the company. Honestly, it sounds like HMRC is actively trying to ban expensive Christmas hampers.
Being surprisingly specific, aren't they? Now, moving away from add-backs for a moment, one immediate relief companies should use is pre-trading expenditure relief. If you have necessary expenses before your trade officially starts, like market research, those can be treated as if they were incurred on day one of trading, as long as they happened within the 7 years prior.
And that allows for an immediate deduction. That's a massive cash flow benefit for new businesses. So once we've defined our true taxable profit, the next strategic step is reducing it through investment deductions, specifically capital allowances or CAs.
CAs are crucial. They're the tax deduction mechanism for buying plant and machinery, or P&M, for the business. They replace accounting depreciation for tax and often give you much faster relief.
And the main way to get that maximum speed is the annual investment allowance.
The AIA is the turbocharge. Currently, it allows for a pretty generous £1 million allowance per 12-month period. That means a 100% deduction in year one. Strategically, you always allocate the AIA first. The only big exception is you can't claim AIA on cars.
And if you use up the AIA or you buy things that don't qualify, you then have to turn to the pool system for writing down allowances.
Correct. Assets go into one of two main pools. The main pool offers an 18% WDA. That covers general things like computers and standard equipment. Then there's the special rate pool, which only offers a 6% WDA. That handles things like the integral features of a building electrical systems, lifts, and long-life assets.
The motor car rules are still separate, though, and very dependent on emissions, right?
Absolutely. Zero-emission cars, so 0 grams per kilometer, they still get a 100% first-year allowance. Low-emission cars, so 50 grams or less, go into that 18% main pool. But the high-emission cars, anything over 50 grams, they get pushed into that really slow 6% special rate pool. That small difference in emissions can dramatically slow down your tax relief.
And before we move on, we have to mention the long-term deduction for commercial construction. the structural and buildings allowance.
The SBA is a slow burn. It gives relief for commercial building construction or purchase, providing a 3% annual allowance. That deduction is spread over 33 years and 4 months. And importantly, the allowance excludes the cost of the land underneath it.
That brings us to our final core strategic lever,
Yeah.
managing losses. When a company has a trading loss, you have three main options for relief, but the choice is highly strategic.
That's right. The options are 1, current year total income relief, which is mandatory and has to be used first. 2, you can carry back against the preceding 12 months total income. And 3, you can carry forward indefinitely against future total income.
So the crucial strategic calculation here isn't just when you claim it, but what rate of tax you're actually offsetting.
Precisely. You want to relieve losses against income that was taxed at the highest possible rate. If you had previous income sitting in that marginal relief band taxed at that effective 26.5% rate.
The spike.
Yeah, the spike. Offsetting that slice with your loss gives you the greatest possible return. You have to compare that historical saving against the potential future rate if you choose to carry it forward.
And the choice of relief option also creates a massive strategic conflict when you're dealing with qualifying charitable donations, or QCDs.
This is a nasty little detail a lot of companies miss. If you choose the current year or carry back relief, the loss has to be deducted before the charitable donation. This can easily reduce your total income to 0 or below, which effectively wastes the tax benefit of that donation in that year.
But carry-forward relief offers a way out of that problem.
It does. The carry-forward rule offers a lot of flexibility. The finance team can strategically restrict the amount of loss they use in a future year. That ensures just enough income remains to fully use the charitable donation, so you preserve both reliefs. It's a major advantage.
And one final important restriction here, property losses.
Property losses can be relieved against current year total income or carried forward, but crucially, they cannot be carried back. It's an easy rule to overlook. Also, a quick note on company interest income. Unlike for individuals, companies are taxed on an accruals basis, so when the interest is earned or receivable, not when the cash actually hits the bank.
Okay, finally, let's wrap this up with the practical reality. The administration side, which often carries the heaviest penalties.
Right. The payment deadlines are tiered based on size. Small companies, so TTP below 1.5 million, get a long window. Payment is due 9 months and 1 day after the chargeable accounting period ends. But if you're a large company, your cash flow gets hit much earlier because you have to pay in quarterly installments.
And when a company misses those deadlines, they face two distinct charges, interest and penalties.
And you have to distinguish between these two because of deductibility. Late payment interest, we're assuming a rate of about 7.75%, is compensation to HMRC. It is not tax deductible. The late payment penalty, though, that's a fine, and it's cumulative. 5% after 30 days, another 5% after 6 months, plus another 5% after 12 months. It racks up very fast.
And the penalties for incorrect returns are determined entirely by the taxpayer's behavior, which is a key point.
It determines the percentage of underdeclared tax you have to pay as a fine. A genuine mistake could mean 0 penalty. But if there's a lack of reasonable care, it can hit up to 30%. If the error is deliberate, it jumps to 70%. And if it's deliberate and you've concealed it, you're facing a 100% penalty on the understated tax. This is why disclosure is just so important. Unprompted disclosure of an error, even a big one, significantly reduces the penalty you'll face.
So, to synthesize the most high-impact takeaways from this deep dive, first, be hyper-aware of that tax spike. The effective 26.5% rate that hits you in the marginal relief band is a real planning hazard.
And second, loss relief is a strategic calculation. You have to assess the available tax rate in the past or the projected rate in the future. You're always aiming to offset income that was taxed at the highest possible rate, ideally, that 26.5% marginal spike, to maximize the saving.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to consider. Given that the system usually rewards companies for getting cash back as soon as possible via current year or carry back loss relief, how much does the temptation of speed getting that money now outweigh the potential rate of return of saving that loss to offset future profits that might be taxed at a significantly higher marginal rate?
It's a pure balance of immediate cash flow versus effective tax efficiency, and it's one of the most critical decisions a finance team will face.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.